So, hello and welcome to what will hopefully be the first of many audio blogs where we will discuss MMOs, gaming, and the internet in general. This one is called The Fifth Pillar Community, and what I want to discuss is exactly that. So, what is the fifth pillar? Well, we've all heard developers like BioWare, Funcom, ArenaNet talk recently about story, the so called fourth pillar of gaming. This goes nicely with the traditional three of combat, progression, and exploration. By now, I'm sure we're all just giving a little groan every time Daniel Erickson of BioWare says the word story. Certainly I am. What I want to look at here in this blog is what I think the pillar that the developers have the least control over, and yet is probably the most important to their long-term success: community. By community, I mean the players who just play, the people who form guilds, the one who's post on forums, fan sites, the works, everything. I want to look at the role of community in the growth of a game. It should not come as a surprise to anybody to know that community as a whole is a very valuable commodity to game companies. While individual people having a bit of a moan might not register on the radar, you can bet that mass complaints by the people who pay to play, be it subscribers, cash shop payments, or just buying the box, can and do register with every company. A vocal community can be the most powerful advertising tool a game needs. Look at the millions of Minecraft fans who, through word of mouth or going viral as it is now, have spread that product from being a little niche game to a mainstream hit and made its creator a lot of money and created a lot of jobs in the process. League of Legends, a game which a lot of people will have heard of, enjoyed a similar success when it started. Personally, I was in the beta for that game, and I remember thinking back that this was going to be big. But it was a couple of friends who invited me in through word of mouth, and I know a lot of other people who got into that in the open beta through word of mouth, and ever since then that game has grown largely through word of mouth. They don't really do massive advertising campaigns. They don't sort of get in your face about it. There's no big push to get people in the game. There's just a solid game and a good community that want their friends to play with them. And communities can influence change as well. If you look at Blizzard, who are one of the biggest developers in the world, Activision Blizzard is actually the biggest publisher of games in the world if you base that on commercial revenue. They tried to introduce a feature called Real ID a while back, which was basically where people's real names would show up on their official forums, and there was a lot of outcry from the Blizzard community about this. People did not like it for various reasons. People showed how much information you could track down on the internet about somebody just from their name. And it was the community sort of pushing for this that really influenced the change and forced Blizzard into a climb down on that. They still put the Real ID system in game, but they gave the players a lot more control over it. You could decide who could and couldn't see you. You could decide if friends of friends could see your name on their friends list or not. And this is what I think led to it being accepted. And again, it's just an example of how a community can really come together and influence change in a game. A community can also lead to a game's failure, or at least impede it to a level where it struggles to do well, though this is offset often by the human nature of brand loyalty. So very few games actually fail purely due to a community turning against them. But if you look at the way developers like Cryptic and Funcom are put on the defensive in their interviews, whenever they're asked questions, they're asked about what they've learned from previous games, what they've learned from their failings, what lessons they've picked up, what they're going to do differently next time. They're never asked to talk about the success or relative success of their games. They're never asked, for example, about the so-called million accounts that Star Trek Online had when it launched, that Cryptic claimed. Funcom are never asked about the massive community hype that Age of Conan had when it came out. They don't even get to talk about Anarchy Online anymore. It's all just about how they failed with their games, and that is in a large part due to the fact that the internet communities turned on them in a big way. Those games have their fans and they have their strong points, but to a lot of people, if you mention Star Trek Online or Age of Conan, those are MMOs that are considered to have failed by the community. One thing that I haven't discussed so far, though, is community within a game, which is the real meat and drink of it. And that's really what I want to get into. If you look at a game that got it horribly wrong, DC Universe. DC Universe shipped, and two friends of mine recommended the game to me, and these are people who I play with regularly, so I joined them in DC Universe, and we had a lot of fun at first. The game was great. It was new. It felt fresh. The combat was exciting, and the setting was brilliant. There's just something really good about being given quests by Batman. Although it's a little bit odd that Batman couldn't just go and sort it himself, or Superman, but I guess, busy days. But moving on. I bought a lifetime sub because I had a bit of extra money at that time, and we had other friends join us. We got a 4-man group going. We leveled up together. We did the alerts, the instances that they have in there together. They were a lot of fun, and a couple more friends joined, and eventually we got to 7 people, and we started thinking about the end game raiding content that they had in there, which was 8-man raids. It looked a lot of fun. You went to the Bat Cave, you cleaned it out. Everything looked good. And we couldn't get another friend from our vast circle of MMO friends to join us. So what we did is we started looking in game for somebody for an 8th person, and that's where it all went wrong. The lack of social tools in that game's launch was just so big of a gap that it really ended up putting us all off the game, and none of us play now. I mean, literally, when the game first launched, you would have to spam the enter key about 20 times before it would actually open up the chat line for you to type in. The actual guild tools were barely functional. There was a lot of pre-typed phrases you could use from a control pad, but on a PC with a keyboard plugged in, really? I mean, Final Fantasy had a system where it would automatically translate common phrases, but that was because they were bridging the gap between Asian gamers and Western gamers a lot of the time. Their servers, you had Chinese players playing with American players, with European players. So this kind of system worked for them because you could get a group going. And the problem in DC Universe was the servers were A, localized, and B, they were very small servers. There weren't many players per server. The in-game voice chat wasn't activated at launch. It was just missing, and when it actually came on, it would often cut out. It would be very poor quality, and from a game that was delayed for polishing, the lack of social tools was just inexcusable. And the problem with that was, because people couldn't easily form guilds, they couldn't form communities, they couldn't form the glue, the social connections. MMOs are a very soulless place if you don't have friends to play with, and basically the community that had built that game up so rapidly that Sony had to actually double the amount of servers that they had within the first week of its launch, and now they're looking at combining them, so basically there's going to be 2 servers per region, and that is a terrible indictment of what happens when you get it so wrong with your community. People won't stick around just for the sake of playing a game. They play MMOs to play with other people, and that's why your community is the 5th pillar to me. DC Universe got this just dramatically wrong. It was just next to impossible to get anything going unless you already had that community there and imported it into the game. The official forums were difficult to use. They required separate logins and registration to the actual game. It was such a comedy of errors on the side of building a community. And to me, it'll go down in history as one of the biggest missed opportunities in MMOs altogether. Like I said, in the first week, they doubled their servers. They were talking about opening more, and now they're just merging them into these super servers. They're trying to put the PR spin on it that it's for players' benefit, so that people have got more people to play with, so that people have got, easier time finding groups. But the truth is, they're doing mass server merges. They're going to have a half or even a quarter of the servers they had at launch, and it's because they got it so wrong with the community. And that's why community is the 5th pillar, because if you think about it, pillars are what you're building on. They're the foundation. And if one of them goes, the whole thing topples. And community is more important, or at least as important, as combat, exploration, progression, and story. Companies should be looking to harness these communities as much as the other 4. And they should really be pushing out, trying to get their communities involved, trying to get people to buy into that community element, making the game a social environment, really. And every time they fail to do that, it's a missed opportunity. You only have to look at Neverwinter Nights. The original Neverwinter Nights, well, not the original because that was by AOL, but the one by BioWare. That game released 11 years ago now. It still has an online following. It's dwindling, it's in its twilight. One day that game will just stop, but these people still work hard. They make custom content. That game is constantly updated by its community. Even after BioWare stopped supporting it, 8 years after launch, they released the last patch for it. That's a lot of support. But 8 years after launch, they released the last patch. But the community are constantly releasing patches. They've got their own expansion pack called the Community Expansion Pack. BioWare facilitated that community. They got them involved, they showed them love, they made them want to invest their time and effort to keep that game going. And by doing that, they have ensured that even when their website gets hacked, the NWN website and forums are no longer available. That community is still going strong. That's what I'm talking about with Fifth Pillar. You give the people the tools to build communities, and you ensure that your game has a long life. Thanks for listening.